Fit to Build Academy teaches homeowners how to plan, manage and complete your dream home build so that you increase your knowledge and manage your project team with a confidence normally reserved for experienced professionals. This podcast is about one thing, building your knowledge and confidence so you can be the expert of your project even when you have never built before. If you want to build your knowledge and confidence and use it to take action, then you're in the right place. All this information is 100% free, so please subscribe and review our podcast. This is Fit to Build Academy. Hey, and welcome to this episode. Today I am sharing a long-form interview I did with Cheryl Leong from the Business of Property. We dissect the building process, the reason I set up Fit to Build Academy, and the most important things that you need to do and understand to have a successful building project, whether as an owner-builder or managing your build with a building contractor. I hope you enjoy it.
Good evening, everyone on Facebook Land, Property Development Australia. Welcome to the Business of Property on a Tuesday evening. Hopefully, most of us who have kids who have gone back to school and now can breathe easy. Chris Huddart, I am so glad to have you here from Fit to Build Academy. Chris, how are you this evening?
Hi, Cheryl. I am fantastic this evening, and it's really great to be here on Facebook Live tonight.
Excellent. So, just to give you a little bit of a rundown, we have sort of comments and all that are on the Facebook page itself. So anyone that posts any comments, I usually sort of read them out here. Otherwise, it's going to be a real sort of open conversation.
Sure.
And the reason why we're really excited to have you on here is, when we initially spoke, we talked about, having a whole lot of developers or people who are looking to develop and become full-time developers. But one of the main sort of gaping holes that I've noticed, and obviously that you have as well, which was the reason we came up with Fit to Build, was that developers who are putting sites together didn't necessarily have the knowledge to actually either project manage or understand that whole build process. So let's definitely have a chat about that. But Chris, before we even do that, let's have a bit of an intro about who you are, what your background is, and what was it that inspired you to start this academy?
Sure. Well, I've certainly got a bit of a mixed background, Cheryl. I started out as a draftsman way back when in the early 90s at A.B. Jennings Homes, and that was a good introduction to volume home building, absolutely. I spent probably 7 to 8 years as a draftsman, and I decided after that I didn't really like sitting in front of a computer all day long, just drawing plans. Unfortunately, I've swapped that for looking at emails now, but after that, I kind of fell into construction and project management. I had a client that I was doing some drafting for, and I wanted to get a little bit of experience in the construction world, and I asked if I could work a day a week in his organisation, and he said no. He said, you can come and work 5 days a week. And so that sort of started the journey at a small building company, and he sponsored me through my postgraduate studies in project management, which was fantastic. I outgrew that small little maintenance company and small projects company, and found my way into larger organisations like Sinclair Knight Merch, which is now Jacobs, and FKP, which is Property Group, which is now Aveo. So I honed my craft in those two organisations, and ultimately left those organisations because I wanted to leave the city. And I'm a country boy at heart, so I left the city and moved down to the Bellarine Peninsula in Victoria, and I started my own construction business, design, project management and construction business, and I've been doing that. Well, I did that for 5 or 6 years, and finally gave up the building full time. And that's one of the reasons that I started Fit to Build Academy. I hadn't set up my building company very well, so I'd never intended to be a builder. I intended to do some build projects on the side of design and project management. But the building took over, and I found that through that, most of the clients I had didn't have a great understanding of what their obligations were. They certainly didn't have an understanding of the process of building. Certainly, they may have understood it a little bit, but not to the extent that they really needed to be able to deal with a builder on a day-to-day basis. So there was a lot of frustration from my point of view, having come from the background I had with fairly detailed project management experience, dealing with people all of a sudden who didn't know really what they should be doing and how they should be responding to a builder when it comes to RFIs and variations and extensions of time, things like that, that they just didn't understand their obligations. And it's through no fault of their own. They're not going to know it if they've never lived it. So that was kind of the genesis of the idea of putting together a business that would be able to educate people in the design and building process.
And is this supposed to be catered to, owner builders, or are we talking about mum and dad sort of developers, or developers who are just starting out?
It applies equally to all of them. So I dealt with mum and dads through my building business. I dealt with mum and dads, but even through my project management work over the last 5 years, I've dealt with an organisation that is hundreds of millions of dollars a year turnover. They were developing retirement villages, and they had no clue what they were doing. They were trusting, but they had no idea what they were doing. They had no internal project management of what was happening on their site. So it applies equally to people that own a building, mum and dads that might be just renovating or extending their home, but also to property developers who really do need to take an active role in the project that they are funding. And that's probably one of the things that astonishes me most is there's people and organisations out there that don't really actively manage their investment. They leave it to others and trust others. So that's fueled a bit of the content in the Fit to Build Academy course, and it certainly has helped me over the last 5 years in dealing with those particular developers that really don't know what they're in for.
Yeah. And what would you say, I mean, some of it might be pretty obvious, but as a developer or anyone that's building something, developing something, for them to not to lack the knowledge of project management or even understanding the tender process and all of that, like what are the big risks of that?
Oh, well, the biggest risk is a financial risk in my view, and you can very easily make mistakes very early on in that design process without even knowing that you're making them. If you haven't chosen the right architect or designer that aligns to your vision, that doesn't design what you're after, and if you lack the confidence to call that out, and you end up with a design that you may not like, you may not be able to sell, and you might not be able to build at your feasibilities budget. So that's the biggest risk for me for seeing that is a financial risk, let alone a time risk.
Absolutely. And you've got a fan here. Alex is going whoop whoop. And Michael says, that's one fine background, Chris. Excited to hear more from the both of you about the stories, the community's burning questions around best practices in development. There comes another child. It's like I've got 500 of
supposed
them.
To be in bed.
That's it. They're supposed to be in bed. They're still getting used to going to school.
Yeah, well, mine are old enough to take themselves off. So
yeah. This one's got away from dad, obviously.
obviously.
So what we were saying, Good night.
Oh, look, we're just talking about probably the risks. I think going back to talking about and Alex, I know who Alex is, so I'll reference Alex. Picking the right project team is really important. Picking your right architect or designer or draftsman, whichever way you go, is incredibly important. You've got to make sure that person or organisation is aligned to what your project vision is, and not aligned to their own project vision, which will end up becoming a promotion for their own website or their own business. So Alex is certainly one of those people, a younger up and coming architect that would really put their clients first. So, and that's not to say that all architects are like that. I don't want to say that at all. But I have come across designs as when I was building. I've come across designs that the clients weren't that happy with, and ultimately cost too much. I mean, I priced a pool house in Toorak quite a few years ago, and the size of this thing was unbelievable, and it was really only a pool house. The client's budget was $400,000, but the design was a $900,000 design. So you look at that and say, well, that architect has really missed the mark. The client, through lack of understanding, hasn't understood what they were getting. And ultimately, that project didn't go ahead. So the client has spent $30,000, $40,000 on what? Nothing. So, and you see that a lot. You see people that end up just wasting a lot of money.
Yeah. But how do people know? And here's the thing that I find, because most people are like, okay, this is the vision that I have, all right? Say, for example, that client wants a pool house and they're like, this is my budget. And I guess the expectation is that when they're briefing the architect, that the architect has an idea, like, I've got to work within this budget. Like, how do they know that that's the architect for them or not? Like, is that part of what you do teach about how to screen the architect or the draftee? Because you sort of go, I gave you this budget, but you've given me something that's more than twice as expensive. So how does that happen?
Yeah, well, it happens very easily. If there's no control over the scope or the brief. It happens a lot, and I think one of the things that is really important is that the client needs to have a working knowledge of the design process, and they need to have an understanding of how to deliver a brief to an architect, so it's reasonably clear for the architect. But the one thing that I've been an advocate of, and I've always done on any project that I've worked on, is I'll get a preliminary design and I'll get a preliminary build price as well. So I won't progress the design too far before I know where it's heading. So there's been times where the design has been heading too far above the budget and we've had to pull it back. But you pull it back before you spend too much money with your architect. So you don't want to get all the way to the end of that process and have to start again.
That's a really interesting point. I'd like to touch on that a little bit more. But let's talk about, I guess, three of the things that were main topics we're going to talk about today. One is the 5 key criteria for project success. So we'll go through that. Number 2, tendering and how to get it right. And number 3, the role that you're playing in the project as a developer. Are you the driver or the passenger? Are you going to be the one that's actually project managing, or are you going to engage someone else to project manage? And so let's start off with the 5 key criteria for project success.
Well, the first one for me is making sure you understand why on earth you are developing or building. If you don't have a clear understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it, well, you need to stop and go back and have a think about it, because that's a surefire way of not having control over what happens next. So if your vision for the project is not clear, you're not able to then pass that on to the architect or any other consultant that you need to deliver the project for you. So I think that's really important. And being really clear on that vision will actually give you a baseline for all of your decisions moving forward after that, because you can refer all the way back to what your vision is. And there will be circumstances that arise at any point in your build and your design and your build that you will have to question and say, well, does this align with what I had originally set out to do? If it does, yes, make the decision and move forward. If not, you change the decision and you revert back. So that's probably the biggest one for me, is understanding why you're doing it. If anyone wants to sit down and do a clarity or a vision session, or read a book on why, Simon Sinek is an American optimist, he calls himself. And that was a great inspiration for me, just even for setting up this business to determine why I'm doing this.
Yeah, and I think it's really it's such an interesting point that you're bringing up about why, because often, I mean, I'm in business and I talk about why we're starting business, and often when people go into, and I say development, I'm not sure if we ask ourselves why we're doing something
It
enough.
can be opportunistic, I think, as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
And when it's opportunistic, it does lend itself to not having thought through all of the risks that you might encounter. So for me, that's a really important thing. I do that on everything I do. Why am I doing this? Why am I making this decision?
Yeah.
It's actually a really good reference point for moving forward.
So, I mean, let's give a sort of an example of a clear vision for a project. Are you talking about, say, an example might be, I'm creating for example, we're creating rooming houses to deliver affordable housing and things like that. So, for me, if that's sort of a vision and a why, I often think that's a little bit easier to craft. But when you're developing something that's maybe a little bit more, I'd say, traditional, what's a good and clear vision to have and that you can express to your architect?
Well, look, even if you go a step further back,
Mm.
as a developer, why are you a developer?
Mm-hmm.
That's the fundamental question. If you're a developer to make money, which I'm sure everybody is, well, that's the driver of pretty much everything. So then you have the secondary considerations. Do you want to create a luxury brand? Let's talk about Tim Gurner for a minute. He's a guy that I worked with at FKP, and he was a go-getter from the start. His vision for Gurner is to be a luxury brand, and everything he does is based on being a luxury brand. So, yes, you can talk about the vision for a project, but you've also got to think about what the vision is for you as your development company, or if you're just somebody who wants to do a development every 5 years, what's the reason that you're doing the development? Why are you doing that in particular? So I think that you need to go all the way back to that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Harris is asking, hi, Chris, how do I find the courage to question the architects? Because architects are big and scary. The architect's authority when we screen them, or a builder. I like the idea, but I'm just not an expert. What do you think? And that's a really good one.
It is. And that's part of the problem in the industry as a whole. Like I love the building industry, and I've worked all of my life in the building industry. But there are aspects of it that I really, really think we can do better. And that architect-client relationship is one where, it's like the position of authority, isn't it? And the expert position where you don't feel like you can question it. But I would go back to, it was Harris, wasn't it? So it's your money. So the architect doesn't have a job if you're not spending any money with him or her. So you have every right to question what the architect is doing. And if they have a problem with that, well, then that's a problem, and that's a red flag. So you have to cut your losses and find someone else. That would be my view. I wouldn't work with anyone that's not prepared to involve me in a project at all, particularly if it's my money.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I
Absolutely.
know it's hard if you don't feel like you're an expert. It's easy for me to say that because I've worked with plenty of architects, but if it's your money, you've just got to do it, because it'll save you in the end. If you've got red flags now, you're going to have red flags further down in the project. You might find their documentation is not up to scratch, and the builders will work that out fairly quickly too. And they'll tell you, they'll let you know, the builders will let you know whether the documentation's good enough or not. Sometimes they will tell you during the tender phase. Sometimes they'll win the job and then they'll tell you, and then hit you between the eyes with variations because the documentation's not up to speed. So if you've got concerns now, you really just need to stiff up a lip and give it a go.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to, the next key criteria, which is also having the right mindset as well, that going in, building that confidence around educating yourself so that you can ask the right questions. And
yeah, absolutely. So the mindset is more about how are you going to approach the build, the design and the build. Are you going in with an open mind and being trusting initially, but questioning? I wouldn't say anybody should trust outright. Or are you going to be someone that's going to be cynical and critical all the way through? If you're the second, if you're cynical or critical, you're going to find that you're going to alienate everybody that you work with, and nobody will want to take your job on. So you've got to find a balance between being positive. I would say you need to be positive and relaxed and friendly the whole time, but that doesn't mean you can't be firm and tough and ask questions to get what you want. So look, as an example, I had a friend of mine that I went to uni with. I was the builder on his little extension, and that project for me, I walked away from that project. I lost money on that project because he was so difficult on site with every single one of my trades that no one wanted to go back. So he didn't get the project and quality that he wanted. I didn't deliver the project I wanted to deliver for a friend. And all of my trades that worked for me didn't really want to work for me either, because it was really difficult. So the owner can have a real impact on how everybody else performs. So you need to make sure that you find that balance between, getting what you want, and what you pay for, but not being totally unreasonable about it.
Yeah. And the next one's probably one of my favorite. It's having the right team.
Yeah, well, we've talked a little bit about that already. We've talked about architects, but also having the right builder. It is amazing what you can do when you have a builder that is organised, is positive, is open to discussions, open to change. Your projects can be amazing, and you can compare that to, or the opposite of that is exactly a builder that is going to just drive every change as a variation. Every delay is an extension of time. That's when you get a project that becomes administration heavy, which is another topic that we can talk about at length, I think, contract administration. So yeah, I think, having the right team around you that is aligned to your vision is really, really important.
Yeah.
Can't undersell that enough. I've actually just chosen, I've got a $6.5 million retirement village that I'm working on at the moment, and I've just chosen a brand new builder. Never used them before. They've come recommended. They went through my 18-step tender process, and they were fantastic all the way through, positive. Every person in the company that we met, from the director down, has been friendly, open, honest. Their attention to detail has been great. Their understanding of the risks of the project have been really good. It was that understanding of risk that actually won them the job. It wasn't just price, and it wasn't just through their tender. It was their understanding of what the risks were for the client that actually won them the job. So when you have a builder that you can really think you can work with, I think your projects really just hum along.
Excellent. Are we going to be covering a little bit more about that in that tendering process?
Possibly.
Excellent. We can ask lots of
Depends
questions
how
there.
dry it is and people want to hear.
We're in a community of property developers. Tendering is probably one of the most exciting things. Okay, so we've got our team, knowledge and education. We can't stress this enough. Like, empower yourself, build that confidence. But to do that is to really just at least give yourself a base level of knowledge and education.
Yeah, I think you don't need. Look, to be honest, it's not rocket science. It really isn't. It's just that everybody that can do it has been doing it for a long time, or they've been taught. They've been taught by someone. I went to uni to learn it. I've worked on any number of projects to learn how to be a project manager. So it's not rocket science. Project management is a process. You just have to understand what that process is and be able to understand what you need to do when, and what your obligations are as a client or developer. I think even a baseline of understanding is fairly critical. You can wing it, but not too much.
Yep. Okay, and so we've got to be able to educate ourselves. So looking out for the right understanding, I guess, where your strengths and weaknesses lie, and recognizing that if you are going to be managing a project, like, do you have enough of that actual background to manage it efficiently and cost effectively as well?
Look, most people probably would, if they've never done it before. It's a very tough place to be, learning on the run and making mistakes as you go. That's where things become costly, and that's where your project experience. Like, your project experience can be terrible, and there's a lot of people out there that would say, "Oh, building it was horrible. I'm never going to do it again." But if you broke it down, you'd probably say that the homeowner was probably most at fault because they didn't understand what they were doing. And didn't have the right project team. So education is really important, and you can have a small level of understanding of the process and be able to do well. I think it's knowing. I think also knowing when you need some help as well. You can get help from your consultants, or you can get help from a external project manager if you like. But if you don't have the budget for that, which a lot of people won't, then you've got to do it yourself, and then that's where you need. Look, there's coaches out there that will be able to coach you through, and I can do that as well. But there's a lot that you can do on your own if you have just a little bit of knowledge along the way. And that a little bit of knowledge can be dangerous too. So it's just finding that kind of sweet spot of what you know and what you don't know. And as Donald Rumsfeld said many years ago, we don't know what we don't know. And that's hard when you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why I think it's again important to surround yourself with as many like-minded people, network, community, and ask lots of questions so that you're constantly learning. And then you're realizing, other people are going through their projects, how, what their experiences are. And then you're sort of via osmosis, sort of absorbing things, and you're going, oh, I didn't realize to ask about that, about easements or the sewer or whatever that might be. And that's what I love about having this community, because there are constantly questions that pop up and you're like, I should, I need to keep an eye out
Yeah.
for that.
Well, I've actually been really enjoying participating in some of the conversations. But it made me realise the other day when I think I made a comment about Gabion walls,
Yep.
and it just made me realise that there's still so many people out there that have their own experience of dealing with Gabion walls, for example, and there is a lot of information out there. So, like, even for me, looking at it, going, well, there's probably 10 different opinions that have been put forward about Gabion walls, and gosh, if you're the person who put that post up, who do you take notice of?
Yeah.
So I think that's it's a good thing having these communities, but it's also a bit of a double-edged sword when you've got to try and wade through what the correct information is that's going to be suitable for you. So
Yeah. I mean, I like to think of that to be able to say, well, take from it what applies, you feel it applies to you, but then be able to extract from that questions that you're going to be asking someone who's going to eventually be the person that puts in your Gabion walls, or whether you so, and that's where you highlighted the point about being the problem solver and the driver of the project. So talk to that a little bit more.
Oh, well, look, if you've done a development before, or built or designed or whatever, your decision making, well, let me put it this way: if you don't like making decisions, don't become a property developer, because you are going to be making decisions on a daily basis. Sometimes you need to make them quickly. Sometimes you have time. But I think in terms of decision making and problem solving, if it's your project, you need to be the one that drives the solution. So if it's a particular subject that's being addressed, it might need the architect or the structural engineer to give input in and the final solution, but somebody has to drive it, because I know from my experience, I've got engineers that I'm working with at the moment that don't respond in a timely manner when you're building on site. So you need to be the person that drives that. You can't just assume people are going to respond in a timely manner at all. Most people will, but there'll be people that don't. And if you don't follow it up, people will just kind of let it drag out. And you don't want that scenario when you're on site and the builder's screaming at you for details, and he's got 5 blokes standing on site waiting for information. That's not a place you want to be. So you want to be the person that drives solutions to any problems. And I would suggest you need to know that you need to make decisions quickly, but also understand which decisions you should just take your time on. So and that's tricky as well. So there's lots of nuances you need to be aware of.
Yeah, and that point about driving the project, often when I think of project managers, I think of real action takers, like great project managers. And this is where I look for partners who are real action takers, who are the project managers, because literally they're like, this is our deadline. We've got to get the information in. You said you're going to deliver it tomorrow, yesterday. It's not here. What's happening? And I think that's what really drives projects forward. Whereas if you're someone who procrastinates or sort of waits around, and that's what I've learned. Like, I used to be sort of, I'd sit back and I'll just wait till they get back to me. They must be busy or whichever. And then I realized, no, I've really got to be on top of them, because everyone's busy. And
that is 100% right.
Yeah.
So if you think about it like that, you think, so if an architect might have 10 projects on the go, but their fees are, as a percentage of the project, a lot higher than say an engineer. So an engineer is going to have 30 projects on the go to make up the same kind of turnover. So everybody's busy and everyone's got demands on them from every client that they have. So the squeaky wheel gets heard or fixed, or whatever the saying is. It's you need to be on top of your project team at all times.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, we've got a few comments here. They're all sort of pouring in. Chris, when you have the moment after this call, you've got a few little questions here. Will this be recorded? Yes, it will be on the Facebook page, so you can tune in any time. All right, righty, we're going to jump into tendering. And I know that's going to be a chunky piece of work there. So let's talk about the tendering process and how do you do it correctly? First of all,
Yeah.
let's go tendering 101. What is tendering? Why is it important? And how can we do it right?
Well, it's an essential part of any development project or build project. Tendering in its traditional, in a traditional project delivery, you'll design and you'll tender out to a number of builders, and then you'll review them, and then you'll choose your preferred builder. There are different ways of doing it, and it depends on your delivery strategy, which we talk about in the course as well, whether it's design and construct or your traditional method. But if we talk about the traditional method, it's very easy to get it wrong, but it's also very easy to get it right. It's not a difficult thing to do. The key for me with tendering is making sure all the documents are together, making sure every single document that you need to give to the builder for them to price is in the package. You may end up with a package that is very, very large, but without it, there'll be gaps. And that includes all the way down to on a big development, you're going to need your town planning documentation. You're going to need all of the documentation that's been approved through council, all the reports, everything. And I'll put my builder's hat back on. I've priced small residential projects that people send out a set of plans and say, can you price this for me? I go, well, yeah, I can, but it's not going to be the right price. It'll be a price, but it won't be the right price. It'll be a price with holes in it and a price with a lot of assumptions in it. So to avoid that, you need to make sure that you've got all of your documentation together, and that can be a lot. And it can be quite daunting to put it all together and say, oh, gee, do I need to give all of this information to the tenderers? I've got to do it 4 times, 6 times, if you're doing it properly. So yeah, look, I think, for me, I've been tendering for years and running tenders as a project manager, and only in the last 12 months have I actually written down my process. And I've actually found that incredibly helpful. And there's 18 different steps that I've taken over the last 12 months in the tenders that I run, which forms part of the tendering part of the course. So helpful for me, and I feel like I got the right price from the group of builders that I sent it out to. Now I certainly got variations in price, and that depends on the type of builder you go to and their organisational structure. But certainly following a tender process makes a massive difference to the outcome at the end. And it actually makes a difference to how much work you have to do to work out what you're being offered. So yeah, if you're tendering out to 6 builders or 5 or 6 builders, you're going to get that many responses, and you're going to have, each builder's going to assume they're going to exclude things. Some will exclude more than others. And so you've got to go through that process and work out, well, what have they actually included in this tender? And for me, one of the best things that I started doing, and I'd seen people do it, but I'd never done it, is a post-tender interview with every single builder. Now that's time consuming, but you get to pick apart their offer. And what I do is I document all of that, document every single thing that was said in that meeting, and get them to sign it. And then that document forms part of your contract. We don't have any situations where I say, you said that in the tender meeting, and they go, well, it's not in the contract, so tough. So for me, getting all of that information together and then getting it into the contract is proved beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's and one thing also is how do you sort of compare apples with apples as well?
You don't.
Yeah.
Can I just dispel that myth right now? You're never comparing apples and apples, because my building business is different to your building business, Cheryl. So I run a business with 4 project managers, 3 people in the office. I've got 5 cars. You've got 1 person in the office, 1 project manager. Your overheads are far different to mine. So the amount of money that I put into the tender for my structure is going to be different to yours. So that is the only, you can compare, when you do a trade breakdown, you can make sure that you're comparing apples with apples, but it's that last part of preliminaries and margin that is going to be different across every builder. So when I put out a tender, I'll put out a trade breakdown which has like 30 line items, covers concrete, excavation, electrical, plumbing, everything as part of the build. You can then sit down and go, all right, well, let's have a look at each of those line items, and you can compare those apples to those other apples. And if you've found that you've got an apple and an orange, well, then that's okay. You put that on your list as a question to ask both builders, to say, the guy that's lower, you say, well, have you got everything? Is everything in that price? And you go to the other builder and say, what have you done here? Because you're way higher than the other guy. What are your allowances? And you might find that sometimes they put, builders put money in funny places. So they put their margin, they put a bit of extra margin in the plumbing, or, it just depends. So going through that trade breakdown is certainly helpful. And that's the kind of thing that you then tease out in that post-tender meeting as well.
Yeah.
So yes, so apples and apples, up to a point. Let's say that, up to a point.
Great. I'd love to see what if you can give us a little bit of a run through of what sort of that checklist might look like, or I know you're going to run through a bit of the course that you have as well, so people can sort of get an idea of what to expect. Matt's asked a question: do you share the expected budget with tenders, noting that the design was completed with a budget in mind?
Well, there's 2 schools of thought. One is no, and let the builders price what it is. The other one is yes, and try your luck. That's a hard one. I don't. I never have said what the budget is. I might give a range. I might say it's between 5 and 6 million. But I would never ever, be really close to where I thought it would be, because you don't want the builder going, all right, I'm a little bit under what he said, so I'll just bump it up to what he said. You don't ever want that scenario. So, you can, but I wouldn't, just in case. But the flip side of that is sometimes you'll get builders asking you and they'll say, well, I've looked at your plans and I reckon it's about 7 million, so I'm not going to price it. So you might, builders are pretty good at having a look at a set of plans and going, yeah, it's going to be around about that. But yeah, I wouldn't share it.
You see what comes out of it. Excellent.
You see where the builders sit. A tender is in its best form. It's the builder putting the best foot forward, their best offer forward, and then you go from there. Yeah. Sometimes you get pleasantly surprised, but most times you're over budget.
Yeah, most times you are. But it you know, even through the process that we've gone through, and my parents are looking at building an extension, and it's a small extension, but it was a, you know, we had about 150, close to $200,000 difference in price, just sort of, but then having to go through and see, you know, what the difference
Yeah.
was and all of that. So let's start to sort of wind it all up a little bit, talking about the role you play in the project, and if you're the driver or the passenger. And so what do we mean by that, and what, you know, what are then the roles and responsibilities of either one?
Okay. Well, put simply, the passenger is someone who goes along for the ride and lets all of the decisions be made for them. The driver is someone that will take control of the project right from the word go, and be involved in every decision that needs to be made. Now, being involved in every decision can be painful for the consultants or the builders, but at least when you're the driver, you know what's going on, and you know that, you know, any decisions that are being made, you people are accountable, but you're also accountable to your own vision in a way. But if you're a passenger, and I've seen it, and I rescued a project 5 years ago from an organisation that were a passenger. They just signed a contract that was a poor contract. It was in favour of the development manager, and then they didn't manage it. So they ended up with, I came in and had to deal with angry residents, and it took me 12 to 18 months to calm all of those people down, because they had bought into this development, but what they got was really poor quality product for what they paid for. So, you know, like, you need to make sure that you need to make sure that you're involved all the way through, and that's actively managing everything that's happening. And I know that's difficult. So if you're not doing it as a profession, so if you're not a professional property developer, you know, you don't have the time. You're holding down a job. You're doing whatever you need to do. That's where it becomes really difficult to manage, or to be a driver as such. So in that circumstance, if you don't have the time, you really need to build into your budget some costs for a project manager or the architect to do contract administration during the build. But even if you have that scenario, even if you have the project manager or the architect doing the contract admin, you still need to be involved to make the decisions. You can't let them make the decisions for you, because, you know, ultimately they'll make the wrong decisions that you've got to live with, you've got to pay for, and you've got to live with. So you need to, I would say being the driver is by far the best place to be.
Yeah. And so for people who want to get better at this whole process of project management, running their own projects, or just getting themselves some base level foundation around that so they can ask the right questions, let's talk through a little bit about what it is that you're educating people on and how that's delivered.
Sure. Well, I mean, like I said before, the genesis of this was, you know, people not understanding what they needed to do. So, I mean, I simply have broken down the process, so from beginning to end, and have created for each section. I've created a video lesson which talks people through, as an example, concept design, design development, construction drawings. We talk you through what to expect at those stages. There's a worksheet that you can use at the end that you can use to check across your drawings to make sure, you know certain things are included at that point. We talk a lot about what your decisions need to be at that point as well. So, you know, there's hold points all the way through a project which require sign off by the client, and that's concept design and design development and construction drawing. So you need to understand what you need to do there. So we try and give you, the course is really straightforward actually, because it just follows the process, but it is designed to give you that baseline, Neville. It's not a highly detailed course, but it'll give you a really good baseline for you to launch off to manage your project. I actually had a student contact me the other day that just said, thanks for the tip about getting an estimate early. We've only just, they've gone 30% through the plans, got an estimate, and their price is way over what their budget is. So they're making decisions now early on so that they can stay on budget. So it's things like that, just making sure that there's pointers along the way for people to understand. I've even, I recorded some site walkthrough videos as well. So while one of my development projects was progressing, I took videos at, services stage, in-ground services stage, concrete slab stage, frame stage, and the like, and talk through what all of those things are that happen, because there's people that don't know. Even property, I've worked with some development managers in large organisations that don't understand construction at all. So it's they understand property and the front end and feasibilities and all of that sort of thing, but they don't understand the back end. So certainly there will be helpful for people to understand all of those processes. So we'll walk through the whole process bit by bit, step by step. I think there's 30 different video lessons from start to finish, starting with clarity and vision setting. So yeah.
So how many modules are there?
There's 6.
6 modules. Okay.
Yep.
And it's sort of self-paced.
Yeah, well, you can go through it as quick or as slow as you like, and it is designed to, it's designed to take you from beginning to end. So from establishing that vision, but also, if you're already at design stage, you finished your design and you need to do tender, well, you can pick it up at that point. You just get all of the other information as well. So it is completely self-paced. There's no restrictions on watching lessons. So I know some platforms say you've got to watch one video to get to the next. I haven't done that. I allow people to be able to just pick and choose what they want to go to. And yeah, they can completely self-paced. There are a lot of worksheets to fill out, and I would encourage people to do that if they decide to come on and do the course. Yeah, they're very helpful. I mean, the worksheets are based on things that I do day to day on my project, so I find them helpful. Hopefully other people will along the way.
And so can they submit their homework to you?
There's no requirement for that, but if there's an opportunity. There's opportunity there to have a Q&A session once a week that we do almost similar to this, a Facebook Live, and just answer the questions as they come up, and that's part of what I want to do. I want to help as many people as possible not make mistakes that will ultimately cost them money.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to pop the link to the course here in the comments. And if anyone is interested to find out a little bit more, definitely get in contact with Chris to see if it's the right sort of content and course for you where you're at.
What I want to do is have a conversation with people first. So I don't want people to come in and buy the course and then I don't know who they are. I want to have a conversation, meet you where you are, understand what you need and where you're at, and try and help you with a strategy if you need a strategy moving forward. There's any number of strategies that you can undertake when it comes to developing or designing and building. So the conversation is what I want to have with people first off. And if when we have the chat, people feel like they want to move forward, great. I'd welcome that. But equally, I'm happy just to have a chat.
Fantastic. Well, Chris, thank you so much
No
for
worries,
your
thanks.
time, sharing your sort of knowledge, your experience. I know for me personally, there's a lot of content in that course which will be extremely helpful for me in our project management as well, particularly with the tendering process. I mean, we don't
Mm,
really have one, and so it'd
yeah.
be really good to be able
Well,
to
neither did
have.
I until 12 months ago.
Yeah, and considering you've been doing this for such a long time, and it
Yeah,
just goes to show, right? I mean, so much of what you do has been sort of just part of what you do, so
yeah,
it's
that's right.
natural, right?
Yeah,
But for us to be able to scale and be able to, get tenders for more builders as well, so that you can get a good comparison and streamline that process. Like, I think that's so good to just have anything, whether you can systemize, have checklists, um, get that get that in
yeah,
place. Yep.
absolutely. No
Excellent. Well,
worries.
thank you, Chris. Thank you,
No
everyone.
worries. Thanks
And
for having me on. Thanks
all
for
right,
having
you
me.
have a good evening. Ciao. Good night,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you would like to work with us to build your dream home or project, please go to fit2buildacademy.com or follow us on Instagram at fit2buildacademy, where we have a link in the bio to book an appointment to chat with us. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on Fit to Build. Thanks so much for listening, and remember, go out there and build something amazing.